Have you ever woken up and felt that the person in the mirror is still a developer, but the job feels like someone else's life? That sense of mismatch quietly erodes motivation, and before you know it, months have gone by and the version of you that loved building things has been replaced by a shell that answers tickets and dreads meetings. What if you could reinvent your tech career in 90 days and come out with clarity, momentum, and a plan that fits who you actually want to be without burning out? Welcome back to another episode of the Change Dude podcast. And today we are going to talk about how to reinvent your tech career in 90 days without burning out. 2 years ago, I found myself at that crossroads. I was still shipping code and meeting deadlines, and the emails kept piling up. Externally, everything looked fine. Internally, I felt hollowed out. I tried the usual remedies, new courses, longer hours, a weekend hackathon. Nothing stuck. What finally changed was a compact, brutal experiment. 90 days of focused, humane change that treated my energy like the scarce resource it was. I didn't quit my job. I didn't take an expensive boot camp. I designed a small, repeatable structure that produced evidence and protected my capacity. The constraints forced me to prioritize ruthlessly. Instead of splitting attention across 10 new technologies, I focused on one adjacent skill that amplified my existing strengths. The first month was the hardest. Progress felt uneven and sometimes invisible. But by week 12, the shape of a new path had appeared. I want to walk you through that entire 90-day design so you can run your own version with less confusion and less cost to your well-being. 90 days is short enough to feel urgent and long enough to produce meaningful change. It is a time window used by product teams for measurable sprints and by behavior designers to establish new routines. The period is long enough to build habits, iterate on experiments, and gather feedback, yet short enough to avoid paralysis by planning. More important than the calendar is the structure, cadence, reflection, and incremental risk-taking. Reinvention is not a single leap. It is a sequence of experiments that together produce a directional change. When you treat each week as a separate experiment, you reduce fear because failed experiments are just data points and not personal indictments. The 90-day frame also helps you design measurable outcomes rather than vague intentions. Next, I want to cover the core principles. Reinvention without burnout depends on 4 practical principles. The first is clarity. Articulate the direction you are moving toward and what you will stop doing. The second is constraint. Focused limits create creativity and prevent scope creep. The third is practice. Rehearse new skills in low-stakes environments so you can refine them without catastrophic risk. The fourth is restoration. Deliberately protect sleep, movement, and psychological safety so you can sustain the work. These principles are simple in language and hard in practice because modern work systems are designed to erode them. Over the next sections, I will show how to apply each principle weekly, with concrete actions that create forward motion without eroding energy. Week 1 is about orient and choosing a North Star. Begin by carving out time for a single honest audit of your skills, preferences, and market realities. This is not a career test with multiple choice results. It is a practical inventory of projects that energize you versus those that drained you. Write down the projects from the last 2 years that felt energizing and why. Identify 2 skills you enjoy that are also valued in the market. Pick one direction that will be your North Star for the 90 days. A North Star is not a job title it is a clear description of the value you want to offer. For instance, rather than saying front-end engineer, you might choose improve user perceived performance for e-commerce checkout flows, which makes it easier to design experiments and build evidence. At the end of week 1, you should have a one-sentence North Star, 2 target skills, and a short list of people who can give fast feedback. Week 2 to 4 is about building an evidence portfolio. The second phase is about evidence. The market rewards demonstrated ability. Use these 3 weeks to build small, meaningful artifacts that prove competence in your chosen North Star. Design micro projects that you can complete in a few days and share publicly. Focus on clarity and impact rather than volume. Each artifact should include a brief narrative explaining the problem, the constraint, the decision you made, and the outcome. Narrative and metrics together make work persuasive. If you optimize a page or design a small system, quantify the result. Percent improvement in load time, reduction in error rate, or increase in conversion. If the output is qualitative, accompany it with user quotes or feedback from a stakeholder. At the same time, curate your public presence. Your GitHub, your personal site, and LinkedIn should consistently reflect your North Star. Remove obsolete projects that dilute your message. If you don't have a personal site, create a single page that highlights your 3 best artifacts and a one-sentence statement of the value you provide. The goal in these weeks is coherence and accessibility. Make it easy for a peer or hiring manager to quickly understand what you do, why it matters, and where to see evidence. Weeks 5 to 7 are about expanding your network with intent. Reinvention is social. Most transitions happen because someone opened a door. Networking doesn't mean indiscriminate outreach or low-quality quantity. It means building a small, high-quality network that can give feedback, opportunities, and honest advice. Create a list of 30 people who could plausibly help you, peers, maintainers of projects you admire, former managers, or community leaders. For each person, write one specific reason to reach out and one clear, low-friction ask. Small, specific requests are more likely to get a response than vague pleas for advice. Set up a rhythm, reach out to 2 or 3 people each week with short, specific message. Offer value when possible, even if it is a tiny thing. A reading you found useful, a short code review, or a concise summary from your experiments. Track responses and follow up once. The aim is to convert cold leads into warm conversations that give directional feedback and potential introductions. Over these weeks, you will also learn how to present your artifacts conversationally so peers can evaluate them quickly and offer useful critique. Weeks 8 to 10 are about running focused experiments. Now that you have evidence and a network, validate your new direction in the market. Run 2 to 3 experiments that test the value and scalability of the work you want to do. An experiment could be a short freelance engagement, a contribution to an open source project with a recognized user base, a paid pilot with a local business, or a short workshop you deliver to a small audience. Keep each experiment limited in scope and duration and define success metrics upfront. Use engagement, interview invites, revenue, or direct user feedback as measures. Treat experiments like product iterations. Build, measure, learn, and pivot. If an experiment fails, document why. The learning is the important outcome. If an experiment succeeds, design the next step that increases the signal. The point of these weeks is to generate real-world information you can use in conversations with employers or clients. Publish short case studies for each experiment and share them with the people you reached out to earlier. Those conversations often lead to referrals or deeper opportunities. Week 11 is about packaging your transition. By week 11, you should have artifacts, feedback, and experimental results to support a genuine transition. Use this week to craft a clear narrative and address logistics. Update your resume and portfolio to reflect impact rather than a list of tasks. Reframe responsibilities into achievements, quantify outcomes, describe trade-offs you made, and show how your work moved an organization forward. Prepare a short pitch that explains the value you offer and the types of roles or clients you are seeking. Practice that pitch aloud with someone who will give honest pushback. Simultaneously address practical logistics. Decide whether you will pursue an internal transfer, apply externally, or start freelancing. Plan for income continuity if needed by defining low-drain interim work that aligns with your North Star. Remove blockers. Ensure your portfolio links work, that your GitHub README pages are clear, and that case studies can be read in 5 minutes or less. The goal in week 11 is clarity and readiness. Make it obvious to an evaluator what you can do and how to get in touch. Finally, week 12 is about launching with energy. Move forward with applications, proposals, or conversations you prepared. Keep momentum high by batching tasks. Send tailored applications across 2 days, follow up on another day, and schedule interviews on specific blocks. Protect mornings for deep application work and reserve evenings for rest. Celebrate small wins because each response is progress. The point of the 90 days is not a magical finish line, but a forward trajectory you can sustain beyond the window. Use launch week to formalize routines that will carry you forward. Weekly outreach, a cadence of experiments, and a short ritual for reflection. Let's talk about how to manage burnout risks throughout the process. Reinvention projects are vulnerable to burnout because they ask you to do extra work on top of existing responsibilities. Guard against that by designing boundaries from day one. Set maximum weekly hours for reinvention work and treat those hours like sacred appointments. Use time boxing to force focus, short, intense sessions followed by deliberate rest. Prioritize sleep and movement. Cognitive performance collapses rapidly without them. Build recovery rituals that are non-negotiable, whether that is a morning walk, a daily wind-down routine, or a strict no-work block in the evening. Recognize symptoms of creeping burnout: persistent cynicism, difficulty sleeping, irritability, or an inability to concentrate. When these signals appear, scale back the workload and increase recovery activities. Reinvention is a marathon of habits more than a sprint of willpower. Designing a humane process is the single best way to ensure you finish what you start. Many people assume that learning a new skill requires drowning in course material and late nights. The smarter approach is deliberate, targeted practice. Choose one high-leverage skill and break it into micro skills you can rehearse in real tasks. Use the artifacts from your portfolio as practice labs. Seek fast, actionable feedback from mentors or peers and use short cycles to incorporate that feedback. Replace passive consumption with active creation. Build, debug, explain, and teach. Teaching is particularly powerful. When you explain a concept to someone else, you reveal gaps in your knowledge and solidify understanding. Be selective about credentials. Certificates can help in specialized niches, but most value comes from demonstrable work. Spend time on a handful of high-quality artifacts rather than collecting many shallow badges. Over time, a small set of strong signals will speak louder than a long list of courses. Practical transitions require safety nets. Financially, determine a realistic minimum runway and design fallback options. Even modest buffers reduce decision pressure and allow you to choose opportunities that align with your North Star rather than those that only pay quickly. Consider short-term consulting or part-time engagements that align with your direction. These preserve momentum while providing optionality. Psychologically, prepare your inner narrative for change. Reframing setbacks as experiments rather than failures lowers emotional volatility. Keep a simple journal of progress and experiments. Over time, this log becomes a map of what works and a resource you can revisit when doubts arise. If you have dependents or constraints, involve relevant stakeholders early. Communicate the plan, the risk, and contingencies. You do not need permission to change, but planning responsibly for those affected by the change reduces friction and builds trust. Imposter feelings are normal and often intensify during transitions. The antidote is to externalize data, share prototypes with trusted peers, and ask for specific feedback. Collect small, repeatable wins and record them. When a friend praises your work, note it. Over time, these external validations become a counterweight to the inner critic. Normalize the fact that expertise is contextual. You do not need to know everything to contribute meaningfully. Become an expert at learning what you do not know and at signaling clearly when you are ready to step up. When you reach negotiation, whether for a new job, a freelance agreement, or an internal promotion, frame the conversation around outcomes rather than inputs. Use your evidence portfolio as negotiation leverage. Speak in terms of impact and demonstrate how your work solved specific problems. If the salary is constrained, be prepared to negotiate for non-monetary protections that preserve your energy and growth potential. Protected focus time, a defined training budget, or flexibility in scheduling. Employers who value long-term contribution often respond positively to requests that improve your effectiveness. 90 days is the ignition, not the destination. Sustaining the new trajectory requires turning experiments into predictable systems. Keep a weekly habit of small experiments that build cumulative advantage. Maintain a public archive of work and an ongoing schedule of outreach. Revisit your North Star every quarter and adapt it to new realities. Career reinvention is an iterative design process. Set a cadence of reflection and short sprints to test adjacent directions. The small choices you make repeatedly will determine where you end up. A frequent mistake is trying to change everything at once. Reinvention is more effective when it is focused and constrained. Another is hiding progress until it feels perfect. Sharing early and often creates feedback loops that speed learning. Over-optimizing credentials rather than evidence is another trap. Finally, neglecting recovery is the fastest way to abandon the project. The antidote to each pitfall is simple. Reduce friction for high-value actions, increase friction for low-value distractions, and protect recovery time as an essential part of your work. Here is a practical exercise to start today. Spend 30 minutes and write 3 sentences that describe the value you want to offer. Then outline one project you can finish in a weekend that will demonstrate that value. Send a short message to one person in your network and ask for 15 minutes of feedback on that project. Direction, evidence, and connection are the essential ingredients of reinvention. And these 3 actions create all of them. To conclude today's episode, an important question to address is what reinvention really gives you. Reinvention is not a fresh coat of paint. It is a rearrangement of your work so that your days align with what matters to you and what the world needs. 90 days will not solve every problem, but it will produce clarity, momentum, and the first set of signals you can use to build a sustainable career. The process respects your energy, privileges small wins, and relies on evidence over hope. It gives you a practical way to test what matters before making large commitments. If you feel overwhelmed, remember that choice is a muscle. You do not need to overhaul everything today. Pick one clear direction, protect your energy, and run small experiments that add up. Reinvention is possible, humane, and strategic. It begins with a single honest step. Thanks for listening to the Change Dude podcast. If this episode helped you, consider sharing one thing you will try this week. If you want templates, a short workbook, and an accountability sheet to run the 90-day plan, check the show notes. Take one clear step, protect your energy, and begin the first experiment.